We're back, and so is Boondoggle Bridge. That's right, the Chernisky Road Bridge project is going to be on tomorrow night's Town Council agenda, and we will get to that. But it's been a long time. I've been on hiatus because I've had a cold, and although that's not going to prevent me from doing things like landscaping, it is going to prevent me from getting in front of a microphone where I have to speak into a microphone for an hour. And you guys don't need to hear me hacking and coughing all night and struggling to speak. So we're going to have basically a one-topic show tonight. Hopefully, if we have time, and we're not going to have time, we're going to go way over. But if you guys really want me to talk, we're going to go way over. But if we have time, if you guys want to hear it, we can talk about basic economics when it comes to the price of gasoline, which is going to be a topic of tonight's show, at least to a certain extent when it comes to news from Hartford. But first, where we're actually going to start is not in New Milford, not in Hartford, not in Connecticut at all, but in New Hampshire. And we're going to start with my first ever call to action. So we've had him on the show a long time ago, but now that he's gotten bigger than me, I need your help to get the most based man on the internet back on the show. For those of you who do not know Jeremy Kaufman, he's the founder of YouTube rival Odyssey, odyssey.com, odyssey.tv, and the library protocol that underlies it. He's the absolute most based man on the internet. He's running for U.S. Senate in New Hampshire and potentially a flip seat on the Libertarian ticket. And he just released the absolute best campaign ad I've ever seen. So for those of you that don't know Jeremy, yes, this is satire with the dial turned up all the way to 11. Enjoy this 2-minute absolute banger of a campaign ad.
What's the problem with this? It's being done by white men.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. This is the funniest thing I've seen in a very long time. So Jeremy, if you're watching, please come on the show. And for everyone else, I'm going to drop his Twitter handle in the comments right now. So you guys can follow him. He is the most based man on the internet. Here, let me get his Twitter handle out real quick. This is his Twitter handle that I'm going to dump into the comments section. We're here on Facebook. Oh, really? No audio, huh? All right. Well, let's try this again.
and they're all killed. What's the problem with this? It's being done by white men. I am Jeremy Kaufman, the Chief Diversity Officer.
Okay, it wouldn't be an episode of the Mike Sennello Show without technical difficulties. One last try. Again, folks, this is satire, and no, Jeremy Kaufman is not. He does not work at Halliburton.
Picture this. Innocent people in the Middle East. They're having dinner. A bomb is dropped on their house, and they're all killed. What's the problem with this? It's being done by white men. I am Jeremy Kaufman, the Chief Diversity Officer at Halliburton and candidate for United States Senate. It is time to diversify the murderous military-industrial complex. We need to make the nukes gay. That's why I'm running for office. Like my fellow Democrats and Republicans, I will support every war. I will support stealing billions of dollars from Americans to kill innocent people, but we are gonna make it so gay. It will go down in the history books. We will say never have so many genders and so many races killed innocent people. Let's bomb Yemen. But let's make sure a rainbow of skin colors are dropping those bombs. These are gonna be the gayest transist murders the United States has ever performed. That's what I stand for as the Chief Diversity Officer at Halliburton, and that's what I'll do once elected to the United States Senate. I'm Jeremy Kaufman, and I'm gay for this message. I'm serious.
All right. So hope you guys all enjoyed that. And Jeremy, if you're watching, please come on the show. And for everyone else, did I get his Twitter handle actually dropped into the comments section? I don't think I did. Yeah. Okay. So I did get it into the Facebook stream. Just gonna go ahead and put this into the YouTube stream so you guys can go ahead and at least give him a follow. And you're going to at least want to give him a follow because he is the internet's best troll. He's better than Ray Lillis, Joey McCord, and Ricardo Lathers put together. So you guys are going to want to follow this. And here's the link, by the way, to his campaign ad on YouTube. Let me just go ahead and bring that up for everybody so you guys can see if you guys want to watch this video or comment on it to try to convince Jeremy to come back on the show. Here's the link to that. I'm dropping in the comment section right now. So you guys can put that on loop like I've been doing over the last 24 hours and watch it endlessly. So we do actually, moving back here into Connecticut. Jeremy, man, come on to the show. I'd love to interview you. We can take it as seriously as you'd like to take it. But some mildly good news as we move back into Connecticut coming from Hartford. And it's mildly good news. It's not the world's best news. House Bill 5501 passed last Wednesday night. That looks like that. So this is the actual voter count. It's effectively unanimous. You can see on there, Billy Mo Buckby did vote in favor of House Bill 5501, and so did Craig Minor, our senator. And the headline for this bill is that it's going to result in a temporary moratorium on the state gas tax starting April 1st, ending June 1st. Now, the bill itself, which I'm going to put a link to in the comments section right now. Give me a second just to get this pulled out of my notes. We'll go ahead and put this in the comments. Here's the bill itself. Here's the actual text of the bill. Again, the headline is that there is going to be a temporary moratorium on the gas tax here in Connecticut. So the headline is you're going to see a temporary reduction in gas prices at the pump that's going to actually be at least somewhat meaningful. And again, Buckby and Minor voted in favor of this. The only reason I think that Democrats actually agreed to this is because the bill came with kind of a bunch of riders that that as a libertarian, I can't possibly actually agree with. So let's just go over the very headline version of this. But again, the headline is cheaper gas starting April 1st because of the suspension of the gas tax. And we can just scroll up so you guys can see what this is. Bill number 5501, an act suspending certain gas taxes and sales and use taxes on certain clothing and allocating funds for free public bus services. This series of riders at the end of this bill that, again, nobody who's libertarian should be in favor of, is why I think Democrats actually voted for this bill, and not because of the obvious economically literate move, which is the abolition, the at least temporary moratorium of the gas tax. Being enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives and General Assembly convenes, Section 1, effective April 1st, 2022, notwithstanding the previous notwithstanding the provisions of subparagraphs A and B of subsection 2, blah, blah, blah. From April 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2022, inclusive, the tax imposed under said subparagraphs, so the gas tax, shall not apply to fuels or gasohol sold or used by a distributor in the state. That means that when the big trucks come to the gas stations to dump off the gas, that's when the gas station is actually paying the gas tax. That's when you are paying that gas tax, and then the retailers then build that gas tax as a cost basis into the price of fuel at the pump. Nothing in this section shall be construed to affect the tax due pursuant to this various subsections on propane, natural gas, or diesel sold or used by a distributor in this state. So that means that it won't apply to diesel fuel used by distributors or sold by distributors. As used in this section, distributor and fuels have the same meanings as you would normally think that they would. And subsection B, the other half of this, during the period set forth, so April 1st through June 30th, each retail dealer shall reduce the per gallon price of fuels or gasohol sold by such retail dealer in an amount equal to the amount of the reduction in such tax pursuant to subsection A of this section. So, in a short version of this is that there's going to be a substantial decline in gas prices starting on April 1st. So if you can manage to eke your way on fumes to April 1st, hold out to April 1st, and then probably start hoarding. Now, again, this bill came with a bunch of riders, but the headline was the moratorium. This is a tiny bit of a white pill, and it's a tiny bit of good news. So I want to share that with people and start off with at least something of good news before we get into the endless black pill that is going to be Boondoggle Bridge. Now, I offer this good news with a but, and that but is, number one, it's temporary, and this probably should be permanent. And because we know prices are going to go up on July 1st, people will just hoard the gas before the artificial price hike. Shortages will come up because people are going to be hoarding it, knowing that there's a price hike coming at the end of this. And Democrats will use this as an excuse to say tax reductions cause shortages or at least don't work. We know that this is going to be, excuse the pun, gaslit. We know that this is going to be used as an excuse to never do anything about gas taxes in this state ever again and to probably increase the gas tax. If this was permanent rather than temporary, Connecticut would become a haven for fuel providers, and the gas sold in places like New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island on the borders of Connecticut, their borders with Connecticut, would just move to Connecticut. So instead of it being sold in Brewster, if you can save like 50 cents a gallon to go 1 minute over the line in Connecticut, you'll go 1 minute over the line in Connecticut to save 50 cents a gallon on tax. What that means is that you're going to get more gas sales in Connecticut. This is a good thing. And on top of that, if it was permanent, since you're not going to get people hoarding it, knowing that there's an artificial price hike coming, right? basic principles of finance, basic principles of any business: buy low, sell high, right? People are going to hoard it. Imagine, God forbid, if during the era of COVID, the government came in and said, we're going to temporarily lower the price of toilet paper for 2 months. And then everybody knows after those 2 months that the price of toilet paper is going to go right back to where it was, or through the roof, right? That whatever that thing was that was artificially inflating the price to begin with on toilet paper, let's say, is removed. Then when you reinsert that thing that is artificially inflating the price of that good or service, it's put back into place. Imagine if you could know that there's going to be a downturn in, say, Microsoft stock, and then know 2 months, 3 months later, the price is going to go right back up to where it was. What are people going to do with Microsoft stock? They're going to buy a ton of it while it's on the dip, and then just and hoard it so that there's no Microsoft stock available. It's going to create effectively an artificial pump and dump. But if it's permanent, if the price of the shares of Microsoft dips permanently, then you're not going to get the hoarding. You're going to get savvy financial investors say, or at least more permanent, savvy financial investors say, take the risk on the lower price. But you're not going to get everybody saying, oh, well, we know this is a guaranteed win, so we're just going to hoard it. If this was permanent, what you would see is a very temporary, minor correction in the quantity of supply. Then we'll be the only state, and then we'll be the only state to get to get people who are going to be paying for fuel, right? Then all of the fuel sold on the borders of Massachusetts, New York, and Rhode Island, all of it's just going to move here, and we're going to become a tax haven. The reason this quote unquote won't work, and I'm saying this advanced because this is what Democrats are going to say. The reason this won't work is because it's temporary. Now, in fairness, the gas tax is not exactly high on my priorities in general when it comes to outrage over taxation in general and here in Connecticut. Like, number one is going to be wealth distribution taxes. Not only have you already paid taxes on that money, why should you, in the case of something that's not even a sale, it's just me handing it off to my progeny, let's say, why in the world should you have to be taxed doubly on just a mere handing off of the currency and the productivity that represents? That productivity hasn't been exchanged. Nothing's happened with that, right? We're not taking productivity and exchanging it for other productivity. There's no exchange. It's just productivity shifting. So shifting in name. So that's why that to me is just, there's no moral grounds for that tax whatsoever. And then, in order of my level of outrage, number 2 would be like capital gains tax. Number 3 would be the general income tax. Number 4 would be payroll and business taxes. Number 5 would be just the rest of the generic production side taxes. And those are the ones I have the most problem with. From an economic standpoint, at the very least, it makes no sense to be taxing the production side of the ledger. The gas and sales tax are probably somewhere around 7 or 8 on my outrage list. Now, can I envision a world where tax collections are entirely consensual? Yes, I can. Can I envision a world where basically Jeff Bezos is paying the entire tax bill because he's electing to pay billions of dollars in taxes, and Elon Musk, same thing? I can envision that world. We're not there. But to be fair, the gas tax isn't the highest level of concern for me when it comes to the various taxes. I would suffer through a gas tax if we could get rid of all of the other production side taxes. And to be honest, when it comes to other taxes that are things like use taxes, excise taxes, tariffs, etc., I'm not really opposed to them on principle. And in fact, when it comes to tolls, because it is something of a use tax, I guess I'm okay with it on principle, but first you've got to get rid of everything else. And the place where, and Connecticut probably isn't even a place where tolls make sense anyway from a practical standpoint, because the two places where tolls make sense are on highways like the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey, where you have a lot of out-of-state drivers driving the whole length of it to get to a destination in New Jersey in a way that it's completely unavoidable. You have to use the Garden State Parkway to get to the beaches of New Jersey, to get to the shore, if you will. Especially the south side of shore, down by Cape May and Wildwood. It's basic, from a practical standpoint, it makes sense to then charge those people that are using that road for that purpose and that much of that road for that purpose, to charge them for the use of that road instead of burdening the other taxpayers in New Jersey who are likely not using huge sections of that road for that purpose to get to that destination, and who are residents of New Jersey. And, it makes sense for Connecticut drivers and New York drivers, who account for a huge amount of the traffic on the Garden State Parkway, as out-of-state drivers, to pay a use tax, because there's no way to tax them otherwise for the maintenance, upkeep, and God forbid replacement of that road. The other place where that makes sense is bridges. Excuse me. So if you have something like the George Washington Bridge, or God forbid the Holland or Lincoln tunnels, let's say replacement of these bridges and tunnels. Let's envision this from the replacement of these sort of things. We're talking billions of dollars, genuinely billions of dollars, for a few miles of road, for a few miles of tunnel. Now, I'm putting it in the framework of a few miles because what is a few $1 billion worth of highway on, say, Route 90 in New York, in upstate New York, between Rochester and Buffalo? It's probably the entire stretch from Syracuse to Buffalo. So that's why I phrase this as just a few miles of road. Excuse me. And that's another thing where if you're not specifically using that part of the road, that tiny stretch of road, and gaining the material advantage from specifically the use of that road, I could see a use tax on something like that, specific to the fact that that bridge just costs so much more than the entirety of the rest of the highways to replace. It's a bridge too, like in the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, and the bridge in the George Washington Bridge, where a huge percent of the users of that bridge are out of state, excuse me, coming in from New Jersey, and a huge amount of them are just people passing through the New York State metro area, and when it comes to the George Washington Bridge especially. This is something where not only is there a little bit of a gotcha because you have to cross the river, and you're bottlenecking onto that bridge. Again, it makes sense to have a separate use fee for a bridge like that. Connecticut doesn't have a bridge like that. Connecticut has no highways like the Garden State Parkway. If you were to put a toll on Interstate 95, people would just go to 84. Everyone would just go to 84. And if you didn't have, and if you just wound up putting a toll on 84, people would use the merit. Truckers at the very least would use the post road. And if it came down to it, if every road in Connecticut that's managed by the DOT had a toll on it, everyone going from New York to Boston would just go up 87, across 90, and into Boston, and completely avoid the state altogether. And then you collect nothing in terms of gas tax from these people that could have come into Connecticut and could have bought gas in Connecticut, who could have made pit stops in Connecticut, gas stations to buy munchies, or a McDonald's in Connecticut to buy lunch or something like that. And a huge percentage of Connecticut drivers on places like 95 and 91 aren't going from out of state of Connecticut to Connecticut. They're either passing through Connecticut and thus would just go around Connecticut if they have to, number one. And number two, a lot of those people are from Connecticut. It's not like the Garden State Parkway, where something like more than the majority of the summer traffic along the shore on the Garden State Parkway is out-of-state drivers that you can't tax in any way other than to get them on the toll. So, although tolls are something, and I know this is probably a hot button topic and it's probably a bad take for me, although tolls are not exactly the highest on my priority list, if there were no other taxes, I could see a place where they would work. However, I don't think that they would work in Connecticut because we don't have highways like the Garden State, and we don't have bridges like the George Washington Bridge. We do, however, have 18-foot-long bridges in the middle of nowhere that are going to cost millions of dollars to replace and years to even break ground. Speaking of bridges, Boondoggle Bridge is on the agenda again. Of course, I'm talking about the Trinisky Road Bridge project, which is on the town council meeting agenda for tomorrow night. I've kind of already made my thoughts clear on this matter. And I'm sure you guys have seen the letter to the editor that I put together. I've got it on my channel on Odyssey. I've got the whole thing here in an easy to read format, so you guys can go through that. It would take me about 10 minutes to read it, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. There's a downloadable version, a downloadable PDF version that you can download and print out. That's a little bit easier on the eyes if you want to just print something out. And that way you have something that you can print out and take notes in the margins in, if that's how you'd like to go about things. Let me get out of my notes. Let me get the links to all that so you guys can check that out if you'd like to. So this is the in-browser version that I'm about to share. Let me get into Facebook. Here's the in-browser version, and here's the in-browser version for YouTube. And then here's the downloadable PDF version. Putting this onto YouTube and putting this into Facebook. So a lot of you have already seen this, and we've kind of already gone over the chronology. So I'm not going to go over all of that here. We've done this on this show. I did that in a letter to the editor that Hearst Media is definitely not going to publish and didn't publish. And that's why I've backed this up on Odyssey, a place that's actually a platform and actually stands by free speech and won't yeet me for my thoughts on the bridge. And since we've already gone over a lot of the chronology of these events, we're not going to go over it here. That said, it is on the agenda for tomorrow night. So Mike Boucher, Jack Healy, if you guys are watching, it would be really helpful as part of your presentations to just have a 2-minute chronology, a reminder of, I'm going to say, all of the bullshit that we've had to deal with when it comes to this bridge. Don't use my words when you go to the podium tomorrow night, but if you can just create, again, a 2-minute timeline of where this project started under Mike Zarba, however many years ago that wound up being, and how many times we've had to completely scrap this project, and how long, and all of the, and how, well, the short version is that we've gone wildly out of our way to and bent over backwards over the course of years to heed to the whim of an obnoxious, belligerent, pathetically tiny minority, which has caused, of course, endless delays in this whole project. And the cause of these endless delays is not only these people that are these 5 or 6 people, these 5 or 6 belligerents. It's constantly having to start over in an effort to conform to state and federal guidelines, especially when it comes to the Army Corps of Engineers. I have it on good account that this project should have been completed 2 years ago, and for a total project cost of something around $400,000. 2 DPW directors have done everything they possibly can to both conform to federal and state offices and the ever-moving goalposts of said tiny belligerent minority. 4 complete revisions is what we've gone through, and a state-mandated shutting down of the bridge. Yes, it was the town that shut it down, but they shut it down at the behest of the state. 4 complete revisions and a complete shutting down of the bridge later, and years later, and here's what we're looking at in terms of primary initial costs for the now 4 specs that have been put together. This is Jack Healy explaining the entire cost basis. Here we go.
After talking with Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of Environmental Protection, Energy and Environmental Protection, we've come down to probably right now 4 different options for the bridge. And they depend on what the town council and the town decides as far as grant applications. Number 1, a single lane box culvert. Removal and construction is $940,000. A single lane bridge, that's a poured bridge where you put the forms in and you form the bridge, is $1.43 million. A double lane box culvert is $1,110,000. A double lane poured bridge is $1,660,000.
Oh my God.
Those prices are best estimates as of today. Mm-hmm. I will say that currently, as I talk to different engineering firms, estimates are sometimes being missed by as much as 30% because of the increase in material costs, which are going up very rapidly.
Jesus. So millions. This is where nonstop interference into the pedantic and specific minutia of the building and engineering process at DPW gets you. This is where this gets you. From a legislative standpoint, from a policy standpoint, I have no idea how this is even possible, and is probably a grounds for either a charter revision or an ordinance change. I don't know how a handful of screaming banshees can interfere with this specific minutia of the day-to-day and pedantic and building and engineering process at DPW. But we're nowhere near done. We're nowhere near done. Not only has it been years and we haven't even come close to breaking ground on all of this, not only is this not now going to cost millions, if we're not kidding ourselves, we're nowhere near done. Why aren't we going? Now, the 5 or 6 people insist on this bridge being this 2-lane, this bridge remaining a single lane bridge. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. The entire rest of the miles of the stretch of Chernisky Road are 2 lanes. And this 18-foot stretch of bridge is 1 lane. Why aren't we just going to kowtow and cater to the whim of this tiny minority when it comes to a single lane bridge? Well, I mean, there's this.
In a quote from DOT in their email to me on the 15th of February, the ADT exceeds 100 cars. Immediately makes this type of bridge functionally obsolete. This is a misuse of public funds because all known deficiencies in a bridge must be corrected as a basis for the funding.
Right. Because single lane bridges are inherently unbelievably dangerous because they're single lane bridges. Because they're a single lane. I can't believe I have to explain this, but the reason a single lane bridge is incredibly dangerous and the DOT and the Fed won't approve of the design spec as a single lane is because you have two 2-ton hunks of steel going in opposite directions in the same lane. I don't care how slow or fast you're going. That's where the safety concern is. That's where the safety concern is. And by the way, if you have an issue with speeding on that road, then that problem is not a problem of a design spec. It's not an engineering problem. It's not a policy problem. It's a problem of enforcement that is easily resolved by park a cop up there. Park a cop up there. If you just park a cop up there a few times a year, then it will become one of these places where everybody knows that you can't speed down that road. Everybody knows you can't speed down by Nestle. Because there's always a cop there. Everybody knows it. And I'm sorry, but if you get busted for speeding down that stretch of Boardman, no sympathy. You have to know as a resident, as somebody regularly traveling down that road, you have to know there's going to be a cop there. And people talk. It's a small town. Everybody knows everybody. If word gets out that that's a road where there's just going to be a cop parked up there that you can't speed on, people aren't going to speed. Slowing people down for 18 feet because they have to go in the same lane in opposite directions, because it's a 1-lane bridge, doesn't make things safer. The fact that it's a 1-lane bridge supersedes every other safety concern, and this is why the DOT won't do it. This is why the DOT gave Jack Healy, who's been an absolute saint in this process, that's why the DOT gave Jack Healy, the DPW director, that harsher wording. And quite frankly, from an aesthetic standpoint, I went up there. I took pictures. That's where you get this thumbnail for today's video. That's where you get the thumbnail for the letter to the editor I put on Odyssey. I went up there. As from an aesthetic standpoint, it looks out of place. It looks out of place for a road that is 2 lanes for the entirety of the rest of its miles of run. There's just this one tiny little 18-foot stretch where for some reason it's 1 lane. From an aesthetic standpoint, I think it looks completely out of place. But by the way, that's not the only concern to get out of that video, because there was that part of the end that you guys might have missed. What's the part of that he talked about funding there? Well, what he's talking about is the fact that if the bridge is 2 lanes instead of 1, not only is the DOT actually going to approve the bridge design spec, the state's going to almost certainly pay half of it, because there's state grants that we can apply for that we're almost certainly going to get. And in fairness, this is robbing Peter to pay Paul, but this is at least a huge cost savings at the point of sale to at least the New Milford residents. Here's Jack explaining the grant situation.
There is a grant application that we have pretty much filled out already, that we would submit in March or April, depending on when the state has not given a final date for solicitation, which would give us 50% of the construction cost. If the town was to approve us to apply for that grant, and we would be awarded, I don't find very often they don't award them to you, the bridge would have to be a 2-lane bridge. It's a requirement by DOT.
So there you go. If you give a damn about taxpayer money, if you give a damn about the fact that you're spending other people's money, half of this cost can be avoided by going to 2 lanes. If you give a damn about safety, that safety concern can be alleviated, at least in some way ameliorated by going to 2 lanes. But now, because we've scrapped all of these plans and we've bent over backwards to cater to the whim of this belligerent tiny minority, we're going to have to also go through, not only is there going to be, not only would we want to go through this grant process, but in addition to the fact that we're going to spend millions of dollars on this bridge, we're going to have to spend even more money on studies and wait even longer on a various array of studies. By the way, all of these delays, all of these studies that are going to take months to go through, all of these demands from the Army Corps of Engineers, all of these demands from the DEEP, all of these demands from the state engineering offices are demands not coming from New Milford. So for those of you in the crowd who insist that it's Pete Bass that's holding this thing up, no, it's the Army Corps of Engineers, it's the state offices, it's the DEP, and it's this fringe minority that is making this design process impossible to get through the Fed and the state. It's making it impossible to do that without pitchforking the taxpayer. But again, we talked about studies. One of the things that we're now going to have to do that we didn't necessarily have to do before, when we could have just used the existing design specs that DPW put together, is a state historic preservation review for an 18-foot bridge.
We will have to do a state historic preservation review of the bridge.
What?
We have to do a state historic preservation review of the bridge.
Before anything can be done?
Yeah. We did it on Tamarack Road for the pipe. It's a requirement by the Army Corps of Engineers.
And how long does that take to get in the
It takes,
pipeline?
normally, it depends on their review. I think Tamarack it took us several months.
Yeah, Katie, I'm with you, man. Like, what? And he just explained there that the rationale isn't that they are suspicious that there might be some historic relevance to this bridge. No, they make you do it for every bridge. Every time you go to the Army Corps of Engineers, they make you do it. Remember, who's old enough to remember 4 months ago when Pete Bass said, maybe it wasn't 4 months ago, a few months ago, when Pete Bass used the emergency authority to supersede the Army Corps of Engineers because they were dragging their feet on the application. Who remembers that? We could have broken ground. We could have just gone ahead and done this thing. But no, more endless delays. And on top of the historic preservation review, it's going to be a mountain of environmental studies.
Army Corps is requiring studies for the bog turtle. We're there again, Mayor. And that one took a long time last time to determine there were no bog turtles. The monarch butterflies and the long-eared bats. So we have to do 3.
So what do? They cost money and they take way more time. And in fact, no matter the results of these studies, which if we're not kidding ourselves, we're not going to find the turtle. We're not going to find the turtle. 10 feet down the road, or however far it was downstream from this exact river, barely downstream of this exact river, we didn't find them. We're not going to find them. They're an endangered species. They barely exist. We're not going to find them. If we're not kidding ourselves, if we're not being deliberately obtuse. But what do these environmental studies do? Again, they cost money, they take way more time, and they don't affect or change in any way the engineering or design specs. And let's just take it from the horse's mouth. Here's the effects of these studies.
So finding any of these things changes our options, or it just...
Well, with the long-eared bat, what happens is it changes the time frame that we can do the work. There's certain times of the year you can't do the work.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
And the bog turtles? How
We
long
haven't
do I
found them
have to
thus
get
far.
them out of
We'd
there?
have to do special provisions for protecting the bog turtle from being injured or entering the work site.
About the long-eared bat, are they like nesting under the bridge? I mean, what is the concern about the long-eared bat?
Actually, they're more concerned that they're nesting in the trees adjacent to the bridge.
So they're not even worried about the bats being in the bridge. They're worrying about the bats potentially being in the trees around the bridge. And as Jack Healy explained, no matter what happens, no matter what these studies find, nothing is going to change about the engineering or design specs of the bridge. It's just going to cost more money and take more time. And if we're not kidding ourselves, this project is not breaking ground in 2022. It's basically, no matter what we do at this point, it's not breaking ground in 2022. A bridge that, again, I have it on a good accord, should have been completed 2 years ago is definitely not breaking ground by the end of 2022. It's just not happening. And the more you delay this sort of thing with red tape not coming from New Milford, in fact, the only red tape that's coming from New Milford is the fact that there is this obstruction and interference in the pedantic minutia of the process within DPW. Those 5 or 6 people are the cause of this, are the cause of whatever delay is happening in New Milford, originating from New Milford. But the more you delay with red tape from deep, from the Army Corps of Engineers, from the state engineering offices, from the state in general, which is where all this is coming from, the more cost goes up. The more costs go up. Sal Rankowitz explains this, and he's 1,000% right.
I guess the point I'm trying to make, the more we're going to have these debates and emails and everything in between, and try to see how much trout goes to the bridge back and forth and turtles and everything else. By the end of this year, this bridge is going to cost probably $2 million.
That's a concern. I mean, I gave the mayor a rough estimate last week on that, and I did tell him it could be upwards of $2 million. I don't, at this point, the official estimate I got from the engineer was 1.6 on a double and 1.4 on a single.
They're predicting $6 a gallon of oil, of gasoline.
That's the wild card right now.
He's not wrong. Everything Sal said is right. Everything Sal said is correct. I think we're being obtuse. I think we're being naive to think that this project, if we go through with this, isn't going to wind up being over $2 million. Remember, I have it on good account that this could have been done 2 years ago for roughly $400,000. And now we're talking about almost certainly going over $2 million. But again, it's still not over. If that's not, it's still not over. This is all assuming that Jack Healy, again, who has been an absolute saint in this process, and quite frankly, if I was in this position, I would have been fired a year ago with how I would have responded to all this. This is all assuming that DPW Director Jack Healy can convince the Army Corps of Engineers to remove the requirement for a 2-foot freeboard. Explain what the 2-foot freeboard requirement, Jack.
In our recent conversation with Army Corps of Engineer, they received their general permit late in last year. They are being more strict about the 1.2 times the bank width on design, which with either one of these, we don't think is going to be an issue. This can be achieved but with either a single box or a bridge. The part that I'm concerned about is that they are also now requiring a 2-foot freeboard from the high water mark. When we applied it to that bridge, to where it's located, it may do one of two things: either require us to extend the length of the bridge, or increase the height. In other words, pick it up. We don't want to do that.
No.
And I want to work with them with that. So we are already working on to see how we can design around that requirement.
So that sounds expensive, which of course occurs to Katie Francis right away, who asks the obvious follow-up question to Jack: what is all of this going to cost? What is a 2-foot freeboard going to wind up costing?
I'm just curious, not to belabor this, but should they say that you need the 2-foot freeboard? How much does that add?
That I think will add another 20-25%.
Well, let's just not talk about it.
I am working, we are trying to engage the Army Corps to not do that.
So this is going to be over $2 million. Let's not kid ourselves. This is going to be over $2 million. And while we're getting technical and talking about things like freeboard, no, not the 9-minute song by Leonard Skinner, but the project, the potential adjustment to this project, which is going to take 40 times longer than the length of freeboard. Since we're getting technical, we've brought up the idea of a box culvert. What is a box culvert? A box culvert is a concrete form. That means that some company in some concrete factory makes this concrete box, right? And if you look at the bridge from its side view, so if you can imagine a bridge from the side view, a box culvert is a box. It's a rectangular box that gets plopped in. Now you're going to have to sink it so that the top of the bottom of the interior of the top of the bottom of the interior of the box matches the pre-existing depth of the floor below the river, right? For obvious reasons. What we had initially planned was for a double box culvert, something that looks like this. So 2 boxes next to each other, but that wasn't good enough for the tiny minority. So we went from a 2-box culvert to a single box culvert. And that wasn't good enough because it was going to disrupt the flow of the river or something along those lines. So they got rid of the bottom part of that box culvert. So we went from double box culvert to a single box culvert to single box culvert, but with an open, but only 3 sides. And now we're talking about poured in form, which is this exact same thing, but incredibly expensive. Why is it incredibly expensive? Because you're pouring it in place, number one. But number two, and this is it's an endless list of reasons as to why it's way more expensive to do a poured in place bridge. One of those reasons is you can't pour in place in March, but the concrete factory can make that culvert in March. Which means, so not only do you have a narrow window of opportunity to actually get it in, which affects the timing of the thing, anytime you have a narrow window of opportunity to get something in, you're inherently increasing your costs. Anytime that you run a landscaping company in the Northeast rather than the South, where in the Northeast you're making no money in December, January, February, March, unless you're plowing, and then if it doesn't snow, you make no money, as opposed to like Florida, where you're cutting grass year round. If you got 8 months to make all your money, then the price of that is going to be higher. It's going to necessarily be higher. So the rationale that was given about going from this to this to this to a really expensive version of this was because this was going to interrupt the volume flow of the water in the West Aspetuck. We're talking about, from a physics standpoint, from an honest physics standpoint, the disruption in volume flow due to the frictional forces, due to friction of water running into concrete in that middle. We're not talking about a redirection. We're not talking about a backflow. We're not talking about some sort of major obstruction. We're not talking about screening. We're not talking about any of that. The water's just going to go right around that center piece of concrete. Right around it. That's how water works. That's how gravity works. That's how volume flow works. And the volume flow equation that's being changed here, the element that's being changed, the only part of that is friction. So there have been people at these meetings that have said that the direction and flow of the river is going to be forever and permanently, dramatically changed. No, it's not. It's not. We're talking about a few drops of water that are going to be affected by the friction of running up against concrete, running up against the side of concrete. That's all we're talking about. So, by the way, who's on board with all this? Who is on board with spending millions of taxpayers' dollars to go from this to an expensive version of this? To go from plausibly safe 2-lane bridge to 1-lane bridge. To go from a 2-lane bridge that we can get half of that expense paid for by the state, which again, I understand it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, to a 1-lane bridge, which the state won't even certify, let alone help us out with. So I don't know who's on board with this, but the town council meeting is tomorrow, and you have to speak during public comment. And the reason you guys who are on board with my take on this matter have to go speak, it's because 99% of the tax-paying residents, because for 99% of tax-paying residents, the response to all this over an 18-foot-long bridge is obvious. Let Jack Healy and the DPW do their damn jobs like they do on every other bridge in town. This is the only bridge where we're getting this obnoxiousness. But by the way, that wasn't the response from the opposition, from the proverbial opposition. Which, by the way, when it comes to the opposition, the proverbial opposition in the room, Pete Bass could proclaim the world was round, and this proverbial opposition would just become straight up flat earthers. The usual suspects in the room agree that this is also agree that this is an easy call, but not the way you and I would make it an easy call.
So if we already allocated 600 and the town council voted for another 600, we're at 1.2.
That's,
I don't
So
know,
the
problem
only-
solved as
Yeah,
far as I'm
that's the
concerned.
only- but the only thing is,
What a disgusting take on the matter. Man, is it easy to spend other people's money. Just really quick to get things out of the way, $600,000 in the ARPA funds has already been earmarked for this project because we know no matter how we do this, it's going to go way over $600,000. So $600,000 from the ARPA funds have already been designated for this project. But this notion that, oh, well, all we have to do, all it's going to take is a lot more money. Well, there's our answer. And you can wash your hands of the thing is an utterly disgusting take on anything in a representative system of governance. This isn't your money. Taxes aren't just your personal grab bag of loot as Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes would treat it. There's no limiting principle in all of this. Well, if it's just going to be resolved with infinite money, why not just spend infinite money? So if you're like me and you don't like being pitchfork over 5 or 6 obnoxious belligerents pet Taj Mahal Bridge, you have to come to the town council meeting tomorrow night. Infinity dollars is not a reasonable cap on when you have to start caring about taxpayers' wallets. When you have to start taking into account taxpayers' wallets. And it really is, by the way, 5 or 6 people. That's all we're talking about. I know because I was there, but that's not how Hearst Media is going to cover it. And I would bring up Hearst Media's article on the matter, but there's a paywall. So unfortunately, what we have to do is we have to go to the archives. We have to go to the Wayback Machine. So I'm going to put a link in the comments here. And I'll get to you guys' questions and comments in just a minute here because we're kind of wrapping things up. Here's the article. This is from Hearst Media, and I'll put this on YouTube as well. So you guys can check that article out if you want to follow along here. Droves of New Milford residents beg for bridge on scenic road to remain one lane as town plans to reconstruct it. It's 5 or 6 people. This is not droves of New Milford residents. Beg for bridge on the scenic road. Sandy, if you're listening, no offense, man, but this is echo chamber level stuff. You have to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me, Sandy. I don't know if you've been in the room. I don't know if you're watching from home. Folks, if you want to watch from home, that's great. But tomorrow night, man, you got to go to public comment because of this exact thing. So let's just hammer through this article. Opposition, by the way, you could have gotten this in the Spectrum. I read it in the Spectrum in the printed format. I believe it's also in the Danbury News Times. This is from the CT Insider's website. It's an archived version of it. But all of those publications are owned by Hearst Media. New Milford, opposition is building in town to a proposal to widen the bridge on the scenic Chernisky Road from 16 feet to 22 feet, folks. 16 feet to 22 feet. 6 feet wider. The one-lane bridge, which is west of the intersection of Sawyer Hill Road and Chernisky Road, was built in the 1930s. False, it was built in the 1950s. For the past few years, the town has been considering widening it to 2 lanes. And we gave you the obvious reasons that's the case. Through public meetings and written letters, many residents are growing increasingly upset over that proposal, which is one of a few options. I wonder if this right here, because there aren't people going to public comment and saying, hey, this is my money. You don't get to just willy-nilly spend infinity dollars of my money. Because that's happening, because people aren't going to the podium and doing public comment, this is why the media gets away with this. In 2017, this is 5 years ago, by the way, and another DPW director ago. In 2017, the Chernisky Bridge was evaluated by the town and received a poor rating. When the town tried to repair it, the bridge continued to deteriorate, and the town finally closed it. Again, in January 2021, they closed it at the behest of the state. It has been closed ever since as the town evaluates different options to reconstruct it and fund the project. For the past few town council meetings, several dozen residents in total, this is just false. This is just straight up false. The videos are on YouTube. You can go to the town's YouTube channel right now, Town of New Milford on YouTube, and pull up the videos. It's not several dozen. Several dozen is at least 36. There have definitely not been anything close to 36 people. It's like 5 or 6 people. Residents in total have shared their feelings about preserving scenic roads and keeping a one-lane bridge. Robert Gambino. I know Bob as Bob Gambino. A former New Milford mayor and member of the Northville Residents Association referred to a letter signed by 37 residents in their Chernisky Road neighborhood. And I guarantee you that if I went out and stumped for this, I'd get 1,000 signatures the other way. The letter says the town council, mayor, and public works department are in violation of New Milford Scenic Road Ordinance, which they're not. Mayor covered this in the last town council meeting. The ordinance reads in part that, quote, regulation of future alterations and improvements of designated highways shall be carried out so to preserve to the highest degree possible the scenic characteristics of the highway, which are indicated in the records of the town council as the basis for its designation as a scenic road. Is the fact that 18-foot stretch of road a single lane, is that what makes it bucolic? Is that what gives it the scenic characteristics of the rest of the highway? No. And on top of that, it doesn't say no matter what. It says to the highest degree possible. It doesn't say sacrifice everything. If the price tag was $1 quintillion, all which would represent the entirety of more than the entirety of the productivity of the whole of human existence, and probably the rest of human existence, right down to the shirt off of all of your backs. Is that what we should do? No. Mayor Pete Bass said the town is not violating the town's scenic road ordinance by proposing a 2-lane bridge. He noted that state officials consider a 1-lane road to be an antiquated design, which Jack Haley read the quote, gave you the language from the state. It wasn't this soft. It was incredibly harsh language. And the town would lose out on a grant if it kept the road as 1 lane. No, it's not just that the town is losing out on a grant. It's not that. It's that the state won't even certify the bridge. It's that the state won't even certify the design of the bridge. If the state, saying the bridge currently is an obsolete design, then that would supersede a scenic road ordinance, Bass said. That's true. If alterations or improvements to scenic roads are needed, they must conform to speed limits according to the ordinance. Which, again, if the entire rest of the road is a certain speed, you just make the 18-foot of that bridge a certain speed. Quote, scenic values are correlated with lower speeds, and alterations should be made in such a manner as to unnecessarily encourage increase, shall not be made, in such a manner as to unnecessarily encourage increased speed. The ordinance states, how in the world is taking a road which is 2 lanes for the entirety of its length, except for that 18 feet? How in the world is making that road 2 lanes for the entirety of its miles of length? How in the world is that unnecessarily encouraging an increase in speed? How in the world is that the case? I guarantee you there wasn't some posted speed limit before for that 18-foot of bridge. I guarantee it. The speed limit is going to stay the same. Quote, a narrow road is correlated with high scenic beauty, the ordinance continues, which is a dubious claim in the ordinance, probably time for a revision. The ordinance also says the town council and mayor need to appoint an advisory committee that addresses alterations or improvements being proposed to a designated scenic road. They did. While there had been a scenic road committee for Chernisky Road and Bridge for Chernisky Bridge in the past, there isn't one now. Right. So you address that with the scenic road committee, the overall one. Moving forward, however, Bass said he plans to hold public meetings about the bridge, which will be open to all residents, which you guys have got to go to, and not just involve those who live near the bridge. Yes, the other 28,000 people that are about to be pitchforked when it comes tax time. At the February 28th town council meeting, Bob Gambino said there are 27 scenic roads in town, and they're what makes the town bucolic. No, the fact that the town is bucolic is what makes those roads bucolic. Quote, do what's right for the scenic roads of this town, end quote. Gambino said, quote, New Milford is one of the most beautiful towns in Connecticut, end quote. Now, we've kind of already gone through all of the rest of this. We've kind of gone through all of the rest of this. When evaluating costs, Bass referenced the 63 other bridges in New Milford. Quote, how do we manage the repairs and the costs as we're going through the other bridges comparative to this, Bass said. Also, when we're using taxpayer dollars, is this something we would use on an obsolete design? He said the town is not looking to change scenic roads. I mean, where in all of this is Bass in any way wrong? Not just in terms of the facts of the case, but in terms of the moral arguments. These belligerents have the mainstream media on their side. Republicans in the room, the 6 Republicans in the room, need to know that these 5 or 6 people are the fringe. To me, it's an easy answer to all this. To me, it's get a double lane box culvert bridge. Get the job done. If they're just going to continue down the path, and by the way, if the opposition is just going to continue down the pathway of cynicism, fine. You want to be a genie, you got it. And everything that goes with it. Park a couple of Jersey barriers on either side of the bridge and abandon it. And then let these people spend infinity dollars of their own money on whatever gold-plated Taj Mahal bridge they can conceive of. And by the way, when it comes to this cynicism, you guys have brought this treatment upon yourselves. So I'm going to go, before we get to Q&A real quick, because as we're wrapping up, and I can't believe we got this done in an hour, as we're about to go into Q&A, I'm going to tell you where I'm going to be for the next week or so. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be at the town council meeting, and it's really tough for me to go to the podium and do the video production at the same time. This is why I go out of my way not to go to the podium. So you guys have got to go to the podium tomorrow and let the Republicans in the room know that these 5 or 6 people are the fringe. You've got to go do it. This is the second call to action I'm asking for on this channel, and I know it's the second one that we're doing tonight too, right? Reach out to Jeremy Kaufman, tell him to come onto my show. And then tomorrow night, for the love of God, come to the town council meeting and go to the podium. You're going to be given 5 minutes, so write it down. 5 minutes is about 2.5 pages. So get it down. Hoping to see you all tomorrow night. That's where I'll be. Now that I'm finally not quite over this cold, but enough that I can, the longest cold I've ever had in my entire life, by the way, by far. And it can't possibly be the jab. So, and now that I've finally gotten my voice at least mostly back together, I'll be bringing back my Mike Reed's channel. So if you guys have enjoyed that channel, I'll be doing a Milton Friedman excerpt later this week. April 4th, which I believe is this weekend. April 2nd, which is this weekend. I'll be at the Libertarian Party of Connecticut State Convention, which, because it's the state convention, and it's the rain date for the convention that got canceled because of snow about a month or so ago, you have to be a libertarian to actually come. But all of the members of the Litchfield County Libertarian Party, of which I just got appointed vice chair, this is what happens. We're all going to go. So if you're a libertarian in Milford, that's where I'll be. Reach out to me. Reach out to me or Jonathan Johnson. And you can get information on all of that. If you guys want me to, we can continue on with the show on YouTube to go over the price of gas economics lesson, which is basically just the law of demand. And apparently 50% of this country actually needs, which I can't believe. And, speaks to my favorite study, which I'll just give you guys a quick preview of the title of it. Speaks to my favorite study, and I use study, I use the term study loosely because I'm using it I'm putting scare quotes around that. Democrats, and the summation of all this study is that, Democrats don't understand middle school economics. This is from the economic, it's a Journal of the American Institute for Economic Research by, I can't pronounce these names. So just kind of, hold on. Sorry, I didn't make that change. Here we go. So this is the study I was talking about that basically concludes Democrats don't understand middle school economics. So if you want me to, we can talk about that tonight. Probably going to try to reserve some time later this week to go over that. Let's see. And and that's what we're going to be doing over the course of the next week. We'll be back to regular broadcasts of the Mike Sennello Show next Sunday night at 7 p.m. As always. Again, the only reason I took a break was because I had a cold and my throat needed a break from speaking into a microphone. You guys don't want to hear me hacking and coughing and struggling to speak all night. So let's go ahead now. and dive into your Q&A. Remember, we always do our live Q&A on this channel. So if you guys have questions, if you guys have comments, get them into the comment section, get them into the question, get your questions in now. Happy to go over all of them. I think we actually did get a decent amount of participation in all of this. So let's see. You have to excuse me, folks, as I scroll all the way up to the top. Facebook isn't the best in terms of their user interface. Pat Erickson, I call BS. It's up to the gas stations. Yeah. Are you too young to remember when we had tolls in Connecticut? I feel like I'm just barely old enough to remember tolls on 95 down by Greenwich. I think there was like one toll when I was like 4 or 5 years old down in like Greenwich, Stamford area, somewhere around there. But I feel like I do remember that one toll that people just dodged. Why not read it at town council? Pat Erickson, why not read it at town council tomorrow night? Referring to the letter to the editor I wrote, because it takes about 10 minutes to read. And I don't know, it's too hard for me to take what I already whittled down from about 15 minutes to 10 minutes. It's going to be too hard for me to whittle that down to 5 minutes. So I don't know how to get that down to 5 minutes, and I don't have time to do that. Mike Boucher, prices have already risen since that meeting. Yeah. I mean, money printer go burr, right? Like everything that the Austrian economists have said about prices, everything that is a reference to the law of demand, and everything that's a reference to the law of supply, when you shut down a complementary product or service, when you halt that potential, of course, that's going to have a knock-on effect on the original product. If you make natural gas, fractured rock drilling of natural gas, virtually impossible to do, then the thing that it replaces, which is oil and coal, is going to necessarily not only not experience that price decline, because investors were investing in that complementary product, because people were banking on those price declines. The way you make up that investment is going to wind up being price increases in the other thing, like basic econ, and the left just doesn't get it. Thanks for watching, Paul. Can someone say, Pat Erickson, can someone say what another area's 18-foot bridge in a town will cost? Why not just do another bridge with the money? I'm not sure what you're getting at there. Sorry. I'm having trouble understanding that. Paul, Ray, Freebird, yeah. Paul, doesn't Mary Jane Lundgren live very close to the bridge? She lives one house to the east of it. And her neighbors, I probably shouldn't have said that. I don't mean to dox people. Guys, don't go to Mary Jane's house. Don't go harass her in their home. If you're going to say things about her politic in the town council meeting, good, because she has earned that. Don't go harass her at her house. And fellow Democrats in the council have caused all this mess. Which one of them called the state DOD to get them involved? Was it the DOD, the Department of Defense, to get them involved after the mayor was going to do it under the emergency construction? I don't know. From what I understand, though, what Mayor Bass did to circumvent the Army Corps of Engineers last year could have allowed us to just go ahead and build the bridge. It was because we were actually catering to their whim, from what I understand. I doubt it, Paul. She could be voting on the issue. It would be an obvious conflict of interest. At this point, declare it a private road and let the residents do what they want. Pat Erickson. Based. That's the most based answer in this response. If they're going to be cynical, belligerent, obnoxious clowns, then what they have earned is that response. You have earned your treatment. You have your disrespect for the preposterous level of disrespect for the concerns of the rest of the 28,000 people in this town has gotten to the point where, yeah, I see why we're getting this response, and I'm not against it. If the town decides, screw it, this is costing us a fortune, we're abandoning the road, and now you guys, go ahead. You want your $40 million bridge? Spend $40 million of your own money. If you bury the single box culvert steeper, it still allows natural flow. That's what I was talking about. Mike Boucher. If you bury the single box culvert steeper, it still allows natural flow. That's exactly what I was talking about. You have to do that. You have to sink those box culverts. So remember how I told you about the double box culverts? They're not going to just sit on top of the rocks. They're going to get sunk into the underlying soil. Which, by the way, if we do a port in place form, we actually have to now do sand tests and soil tests to see if the state will actually allow us to pour and form based on the soil makeup underlying that. And it may be something where like every engineer on earth is like, yeah, it's okay, fine, it's okay. But we're dealing with a government bureaucracy. They could just arbitrarily say, no, you don't get to pour in place. And then what? And then what? How much money is it going to take to circumvent that? Mike Boucher, please don't. Sorry, Pat Erickson says, Mike Boucher, please don't use common sense, right? David Stalvey, the head of the Chernisky Road residents, quote unquote, Chernisky Road residents, is threatening a lawsuit. If he wants it done his way, perhaps they can bond it themselves. Why should I pay more for a small group of wealthy landowners to get their way? 100% on board. And this is the majority opinion in town. There's no way that these 5 or 6 people are the majority opinion in the town on this matter. There's no way that's the case. And again, if they're going to just endlessly obnoxious this thing, then fine, it's yours. The bridge, just give them the bridge. Just let the people that have the surrounding properties, don't even sell it to them. Just abandon the bridge and say it's yours. Give it to them for free. And David Stalvey's correct. Again, if they're threatening a lawsuit over all this, if they're really threatening a lawsuit, I haven't heard this. This is news to me. And I'm going to have to vet it. But if they really actually are threatening a lawsuit, then correct. If he wants it done his way, perhaps they can bond it themselves. Correct. The other taxpayers matter. Infinity dollars is not a budget. Take the scenic road designation off the road. Yeah, I mean, Paul, I kind of hate the notion. I'm the crazy libertarian in the room, so I kind of hate the notion of a scenic road designation. Like, what about a road makes it intrinsically valuable? There's nothing about a road that is intrinsically valuable. The surrounding environment might carry some sort of intrinsic value, but a road serves a utilitarian purpose. It allows you to get from point A to point B. That's all a road does. A road is not supposed to be some artistic painting of, some artistic mural of the scenic beauty of the hills of northern New Milton. No. We make these things out of asphalt and concrete in the South because they serve a strictly utilitarian purpose. It's not the road that's bucolic. It's the scenery around the road. So, I don't know. It would take an awful lot to remove the scenic road designation off of that road. I think that's probably, from a political strategy standpoint, the wrong way to go about this. But I would be in favor, if everyone else is on board, let's go ahead and just dissolve the scenic road. Well, I don't know if we legally can from the state, but I'm in favor of giving the state, the old Bafangul. So, I don't think there should be scenic road designations in the first place. Offer to let them pay for the bridge, Pat Erickson. This, again, it's the most cynical take, but they've brought it upon themselves. And like I gave a take which isn't necessarily cynical, and you guys are coming back with the cynical take because it's due. Because they've deserved it. They've brought it upon themselves. They've earned it. Excuse me. I'm not going to use the word deserve. I retract that statement. They didn't deserve it. They've earned it. They've earned it. This is the majority position of people in town. Rebecca Ribillard. Sorry, I'm butchering your last name. I'm sorry. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. How does it meet the criteria for ARPA funds? Well, I'll give you the reductio ad absurdum version. And the reductio ad absurdum version is once you've spent a certain amount of the ARPA funds on certain things, you can spend the ARPA funds on basically anything. So that's, again, it's the reductio version of that answer, and it's the shortest version of that answer. We'd have to go sit through about 25 town council meetings to go over exactly why that's the case. The short version is we've spent enough of the ARPA money on other things that are part of that ARPA funds. And for those of you who are frustrated by this whole thing, I am too. I was the crazy libertarian in the room that said the ARPA fund's mere existence is just an extortion of the taxpayers. The mere existence is just an extortion of the taxpayers, and it should just go back into their pockets. And we should find ways to just circumvent. So legally, you can't just issue a tax refund, but you should find ways legally to basically get around that. And one of the ways I proposed was to create a grant-making mechanism for homeschooling, to put that money into the hands of parents, to get it at least into the hands directly. Well, it wouldn't be quite directly, of the taxpayers themselves, so that they can spend their money the way they want to spend their money. Because I personally give a damn about people's wallets. I am not a fan of taking at gunpoint somebody's money especially if that means then spending it as though it were a grab bag full of loot. So again, I'm the crazy libertarian in the room that would have voted no to virtually all of the ARPA spending, but on actual principle, not on red team bad, not on Pete Bass bad, which is what the opposition is obviously and nakedly engaging in right now when it comes to the ARPA funds. When they're not voting in favor of something, it's partisanship, pure partisanship. There's no underlying principle saying why you would oppose it. I'm giving you the underlying principle. I'm giving you the underlying principle why I would oppose virtually all of the distributions that have gone out. Like, if I were to think of one off the top of my head that I might have been in favor of, it would be the temporary moratorium on sewer connection fees to the WPCA or CPA, whatever it is, the town sewer. And only because that seems to me to be basically a way of funding a reduction in use taxes for certain people. I don't know. I feel like it's still picking favorites, but and government shouldn't be in the business of picking favorites. But that's probably something I might have voted for. In general, I would have voted against just about every one of these ARPA funds. But I actually have a principle. I actually have a logical rationale for voting against virtually all of the ARPA funds. And it's not just red team bad. Mike Boucher, scenic road ordinance has not been broken. Process that requires it has not begun yet. Very interesting. I love having Mike Boucher in the comments section here. You learn something new every day. If the scenic road ordinance had actually been violated, I'm very certain, because there's already Connecticut general statutes regarding this, all you'd have to do is report it. All you'd have to do is report it to some reporting agency, and the state would intervene. The state would be suing the town, not some local resident. Rebecca, I'm just going to use your first name because I don't want to continue butchering your last name. If they go with one lane and the state does not certify it, does that open the town up for lawsuits in the case of accidents? The short version is yes. The long version is no. Rainey DeBella did talk about this. The likelihood that somebody would get into an accident on that bridge and argue that the reason they got into that accident was because of the decision of the governing body in this case to not go to a two-lane bridge, that argument would be an incredibly difficult and, in fact, specious argument to prove in court. So could they bring a suit? Well, anyone can sue anything over anything and lose the case, right? Is there a liability that the insurer or the underwriter would consider in this case? And Randy DeBella kind of intimated the answer is maybe, but it's not going to be a meaningful increase in those premiums. So, as far as the legal concern over liability when it comes to the one-lane bridge versus two-lane bridge, the short answer is yes, technically there is some liability associated with that. The long answer is no, because those cases are never going to get won in court. Mike Boucher, double-lane box culvert bridge would be the least expensive option and cost taxpayers the least. Hey, there's somebody who gives a damn about you, the taxpayer, who gives a damn about the other 28,000 residents and their wallets in a time where, we're having inflation go completely out of hand, where we're having full-on runaway inflation. Right, where gas, though it's going to get a little dip in price because of a temporary moratorium on the gas tax, gas costs, a Brandon a gallon at this point, right? So, hey, somebody speaking on behalf of, again, the other 28,000 residents that especially now cannot afford to be blowing money on a Tajma bridge. How about that? Chris Lundgren, just put in a modern two-lane bridge and be done with it. Oh, you mean let DPW do their jobs? Chris, we're on board. Less money and safer. I mean, you just did it in 4 words. It's taken me, an hour and 20? Well done, Chris Lundgren. Maybe he should run the show. Maybe we should just pass the reins off to Chris. I'm surprised there weren't more heads on that bridge. Sorry, I don't know what that means. I'm a little bit autistic when I read things and there's even minor grammar imperfections. Sorry, I don't know what that means. But yeah, Chris, just is basically saying, get out of DPW's way, let them do their goddamn jobs. And in this case, getting out of their way and letting them do their goddamn jobs is not only going to cost taxpayers less money, it's going to make this whole situation safer. And again, the environmental concerns are dubious at best. A turtle that we're not going to find, right? And if we find it, nothing's going to change about the engineering and design specs. A bat that might be in the trees around the bridge, and all that's going to affect is the time of year that we can do certain parts of the building process. And what was it? What was it? Butterflies, monarch butterflies. And if we find monarch butterflies in the flowers around the bridge, how does that affect the project? It doesn't at all. So these again are just ways to drive up costs and drive up the time. Mike Boucher explains that what Chris Lundgren was saying in that sentence was head-on collisions. Thank you, Mike. Now I understand. I'm surprised there weren't more head-on collisions on that bridge. Okay, he's using head-ons as a shorthand for head-on collisions. Okay, thank you. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. There's been claims that bridge sees a constant flow of 18-wheelers. Let me see if I can pull in. No, I'm not going to pull in. It's going to take too long. I took a photo of the weight ratings there, and I showed the photo of the weight ratings for the vehicles because there's signs before that bridge that say, here's the weight rating for each type of vehicle. And I took it to people who I know in town that drive 18-wheelers, and they looked at that sign and said, at best, that weight rating for an 18-wheeler would be an empty 18-wheeler. That's at best that's what that weight rating would be. Which means if there were 18-wheelers, and again, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So if I'm to play devil's advocate, then I would assume that this is true, but I'd consider it a specious claim, and I want to see evidence that there are 18-wheelers going down that tiny road. But number one, if there are, and it's because of Google Maps, then the problem is with Google Maps and not with the engineering and design specs of the bridge. And if they were doing it when there was one-lane bridge, they're going to do it when there was a two-lane bridge. Bringing it down to one-lane bridge, which is what it was, isn't going to stop that from happening. You know what's going to stop that from happening? Parking a cop up there. And when a cop sees an 18-wheeler go over a bridge that there's no way that 18-wheeler is weight rated for, he pulls one guy over one time. And then that guy, when he gets reported to DOT, because he's not answering to the DMV, he's answering to DOT. When that truck driver gets reported to DOT for going over a bridge overweight, his life is over. That company is done. That company is buried in fines. That guy is probably losing his commercial driving privileges from the state. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. And truckers talk. You pull over one 18-wheeler one time and report him to the state for being overweight, going over a bridge, this is a serious violation. This isn't 85 and a 65. Okay, I'm sorry, judge. Let's negotiate this down to disobeying a sign, and you pay a $200 fine, and you get 2 points on your license. No. You go over a bridge overweight in a truck, in a commercial truck, and an 18-wheeler, you're done. You're done. You're done. And then every other trucking company, every other truck driver on earth is finding out about it like that. And no one is going over that road ever again. It would take paying a cop to spend however long it is to go out there and catch a guy. That's it. That's it. Park a cop up there. And you know what? He can pull over speeders too. Those posted weights were after the damage to the bridge was discovered. But the bridge has to be certified as weight rated, Mike, right? Like, there were no posted weights prior. I don't care. There's no way that in building a bridge, you don't have to go through the state process of determining a weight rating for that bridge. There's no way that's not the case. And truckers by the DOT, because I've had to go through this and driving big ass trucks, it's the obligation is on the driver and on the trucking company to know what the weight ratings are on that bridge, even if they're not posted. It's not quite like driving a car. It's not quite like dealing with the DMV. It's the DOT. It's a little bit different. And again, now that those signs are there, it negates the point anyways, because the signs are there. And now that the signs are there, even if we go to 2 lanes and we get one 18-wheeler, Mike Boucher, you are correct. Yeah, I am correct. Yeah, not only do you have to get the weight rating certified in the first place, now that the signs are there, there's no excuse. Now that the signs are there, the solution to the problem is park a cop up there. if it's even a problem in the first place, which I think is a dubious claim. All right, folks, it looks like we've gotten through all the questions and comments. Thanks so much. My throat is actually starting to get a little bit worn out because I am not quite completely over it. I gave you the schedule for the week. I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow night. And honestly, if folks don't come tomorrow night to make these genuinely excellent and valid points that you guys are making here tonight with me, like, then we run the risk of Republicans in that committee either getting gaslit unfairly, or which is probably going to happen anyways, but there's going to be no credence to it. There's going to be no credence to it whatsoever if we get even so much as 5 or 6 people saying, stop spending infinity dollars of my money. This is my money. It's not a grab bag full of loot. You are not some 5-year-old in a cartoon entitled Calvin and Hobbes. You are grown-ass adults. Stop spending my money like this. And again, I hope to see everybody tomorrow night. I will be there. Unfortunately, I'm probably not going to be able to go to the podium just because of my job while I'm there. I'm working. I'm on the clock while I'm there, if you will, proverbially, not literally. So that we'll see you tomorrow night, hopefully. We'll see you next week, too, as we return back to the regular schedule of things. Everybody, sincere thanks for joining.